Hello and welcome to the Autistic Me podcast. I am your host, Christopher Scott Wyatt. Our guest for this episode is the author of Disability, a Field Guide for the Rest of Us, which will be available in January 2022. Tracee Garner is a case manager for a nonprofit, a prolific novelist, and a writing coach. She's also a passionate self-advocate for the disabled. Tracee was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy at the age of 2. While in elementary school, Tracee received her first wheelchair. Tracee is the author of 15 books with more than 100,000 copies sold. She's a romance writer of deep faith, and I am very honored to welcome Tracee Garner to the Autistic Me podcast.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris. It's great to be here, and I'm so excited to talk with you on your podcast, Autistic Me. And I look forward to touching on lots of different subjects today.
Let's start off with the Disability, a Field Guide for the Rest of Us. You are a case manager for a nonprofit that aims to help people find self-sufficiency. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Sure. Find a level of independence that's right for them, is what I always say. It could mean a number of different things. I help people with their goals. I work for a Center for Independent Living in Northern Virginia, just outside of DC. And when people come to our center, they have a number of immediate needs, but they also have long-term goals that might be, getting employment, gainful employment, improving their resume to get the employment, but also shelter, housing. There may be food insecurities. They have a number of needs that they come to our center to see about, and also grow in their own confidence and self-actualization and advocacy. And so we're just really peers. One of the requirements and a federal mandate for Centers for Independent Living is that at least a portion, maybe 51%, I'm not sure if it's still that much, but 51% of the staff have disabilities of their own. And so we have a peer-based model that makes it so much more, I feel we're so much more competent and able to relate to the people that come to our office for help.
Your success has come through these challenges of muscular dystrophy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people who turn into this podcast and tune into other podcasts are searching for hope and somewhat a sense of mentorship.
Right.
You have such a positive outlook. Do you think that that is key to the success that you have as a caseworker?
I think it is. It's sometimes, though, it's not always transferable. Personally, absolutely. I'm actually a preacher's kid. My dad is no longer living. He died about 10 years ago, but he was a ordained minister. And so that faith comes from him. And my mother, of course, who, never really treated me that differently. Of course, they made concessions, but I just felt regular all the time. And with support, if I still wanted to do something, they were always there to make it happen. They never said, well, because you're disabled, you can't do that. So they always found ways. And I was always really determined, even in myself. I really wanted to do things. But what I find is just talking to people. People need an outlet sometimes to talk to and work through their own problems. And so that is sometimes, it doesn't happen after that first meeting. But the more we talk and the more they get encouraged and also see that there's resources out there and they find other people with disabilities, that's really where, the good assistance and the slow kind of turn that people can make towards hope. And the other thing I find is that people lack purpose sometimes. When you get out of high school, you had something to do every day. It's almost like you were already employed. You had something to do every day. You got a bus. It picked you up. You went and hung out with your friends. You ate lunch. You kind of had this routine thing going. And I noticed that, when I graduated from high school, I was able to get into college, but I actually failed out of college and got a suspension for some of my grades. And so when I lost that, that kind of sends you into this spiral of depression and like, what am I supposed to do with myself? And, where's the transportation to come help me to get where I need to go? Where are the friends? I'm supposed to be in class every day. Where is all this structure? And it's really where people don't have that they lose hope you got to be doing something. And I think the writing really saved me while I was in college. After I got to my next, I went to a community college after failing out of a 4 year university and kind of got smaller classes, got people who cared, and just was able to have more focus on me as an individual instead of a 300 class that was just torture. So those things made a difference for me in finding purpose in a place.
What led you to write Disability, a field guide for the rest of us, when usually you're writing something else? You're writing suspense, romance.
Definitely. My heart will always be in romance. It's my first love. I really wrote a field guide. I have several iterations of a field guide that span more than 12 years. I've been trying to write this book forever. What I really wanted to do at first, I remember having meetings with other friends with disabilities. I told them, I'm going to pay you guys, $50 to $100 to write articles for this compilation I want to put together. And everyone was so unmotivated. It's like writing was your thing, Tracee. It's not ours. And so it just never happened. And I got so frustrated. So what I decided to do, in the last 3 years was that I'm going to just do it together. I'll write all of the components, and really I look at it as almost like a handbook and kind of what I do every day as a case manager, these same recurring issues. Where do I find transportation? How am I going to be able to drive? Are you driving? All the things people ask me all the time. How do you drive? Well, I have a vehicle that is kind of like my wheelchair in that it has hand controls and a joystick and a digipad where I can switch gears and I press a lot of buttons. I don't ever turn the steering wheel. Just so many things that people want to know, kind of in a book format, almost like the yellow pages. So I decided to take these first 9 topics: transportation, employment, advocacy, even emergency preparedness, caregiving, and several other topics. And I just said, I'm just going to do it. I asked my friends for a long time. They're not inclined to write, so just do it. And so the second volume, now that they have a blueprint of this book, I'm hoping the second volume, I'm going to be opening to everyone who read the book and other people. They'll finally see. Sometimes you have to demonstrate for people something. And so I'm hoping that then book 2, because it says volume 1 on the book that I have now, volume 2 will be everybody's. They can pick a topic and then they can write about it in the way that I've kind of blueprinted how they might do it.
I want to tackle the subjects in sort of a priority order. Right now, a number of the families who are followers of the podcast and the blog have written to me about caregivers. There is a shortage of qualified caregivers in the United States right now. The pandemic has exacerbated the problem.
Yes.
How do we approach this need for caregivers in independent living? Some of us have needs where we can work jobs, we can do things, but we have physical or emotional needs that require some support. How do we go about obtaining that support, especially right now when it's so difficult to find qualified help?
It is so difficult. I am having this problem. I've had caregivers in and out for about 20 years since I was in my 20s. I've always hired my own people. I beat the bushes to find them. I think we have like a twofold, maybe even a threefold problem. Number one is that the caregiving industry is so undervalued and so underpaid. That's the first thing. Along with that, not only is it undervalued and underpaid, I think, people who would be caregivers don't always realize the impact that they have on people with disabilities. We always talk about caregiving in the elderly field, but there are so many of us young people who also need care and who also need support. And we need to really kind of partner with the geriatric side of that to see if we can, expand the pool of people. Because sometimes when people, work with me, they're like, wow, you're really active. And so that almost makes it seem like I don't need help. Well, I can't get out of bed by myself. Once I get up and get going, yeah, I'm great. But I really need you. And you have to understand how important your job is to helping me live my job and also be my daily life and being a contributing member to society. The second part is that, sometimes we don't really reach out of our comfort zone to build a better network of people, of friends, extended family, and people who aren't related to us. And so I think a lot of times your family and close friends don't know that you're having this issue, this deficit of caregivers, and they don't know how to support you. So rather than ask you, how can I support you? They just assume that you've got it together, especially for parents. Here you are with this disabled child. You guys appear everywhere you go. You seem really together. Me as a strong woman, nobody ever thinks that I need any help, but I do. It's hard to ask for help. And it's hard for other people to come along and say, I can give you some help. Just tell me how to be helpful. That requires us to be out of our comfort zone. That requires us, the pandemic has really made us siloed in our own little cubicles, if you will, our own little houses, and we're not venturing out. We're not getting to know other people. And so we're really suffering in silence. So those are some of the issues. The other thing is that when I advertise, I have a list of 11 places that I send out to anybody who asks. And it talks about where to post. I just recently started using Indeed because someone recommended to me. It's a little bit expensive and most people don't have the funds. They charge you almost per application, but the quality of people that you get applying is sometimes better than I used to post at the library. People are afraid of Craigslist because of the Lifetime movie, The Craigslist Killer. All of these different things that you have to do, and you have to do them all at one time. So you can't just put a posting. I used to post at the library. Well, then people stopped going to the library because of the pandemic. So you have to make a concerted effort to find people and to really grow your pool. You can't just post at the library and think that, oh, I'm going to get all these applicants. You have to really post here, there, and everywhere, and also use word of mouth. And so it's really when you do all of those things that you really start to increase your pool of applicants coming through the door.
A colleague has always looked at nearby nursing schools and places that train physical therapists, respiratory therapists, because those individuals are headed into a medical career.
Right.
And when you have medically complex needs, it's comforting to have someone who is on that career path. But the problem is they eventually become a nurse or a physical therapist.
Yes. And they leave.
Yeah,
and that's a high turnover. And it's such a high turnover job, again, also because of the lack of compensation. And there's no universal health care for the applicants. They basically have to find their own health care, and the state is paying a very small wage, about $13 and something an hour is what we're making in a very high price area here in Northern Virginia. And that's not a living wage, and so all of these things factor in to, how we're able to do. I even talked to somebody, just for my job who said that, one individual wanted $100 an hour. I just like, really? Who can afford that except people who have a lot of money and who have that income. So, there's a lot of things wrong that contribute to that. And also just the risk. And then you have to go back to the main reasons about they don't also have health care. They don't have child care in order to care for their own kids who may or may not have disabilities themselves. So, and then they're afraid going into someone's home. What if the client doesn't want to wear a mask, hasn't been vaccinated? You also have to think about your own contributions to not finding people. People don't want to work with you because I know even for me, I'm a little bit heavier. So I have the latest technology. I have a lift, a ceiling lift, rather than a crank lift. The crank lifts are old and they're hard to maneuver on carpet. So I have, really a nice state-of-the-art ceiling lift that anybody could really use, and it's not such back-breaking work. But I've heard my caregivers complain about, my other patient doesn't have this, and I'm not faulting them, but you need to find the funding and the resources to get the technology. They don't want to use a certain equipment, like maybe they don't want to use the bedside commode. They'd rather have you pull and tug on them and lift them. That's also a deterrence for people to work with you. If you're going to be so obtuse about how you need help, you need to realize that you're overweight and people can't necessarily help you the way that you want to be helped. And so you have to compromise. And so making it easier on my caregivers is also important to me in order to help them stay and not sticking to my way or the highway type of feeling.
In addition to getting the caregiver into your house, we all have to run errands. We have to go places, whether it's school, the doctor, the hospital. For many of us, driving is a challenge. Some of us cannot drive for a variety of reasons. Obviously, some physical disabilities limit the ability to drive, some cognitive impairments limit the ability to drive. I would say maybe a quarter of the autistics I know are unable to drive for either physical or cognitive reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we navigate a transportation system that is, forgive me, but one of the most deficient in the developed world?
Yes.
It's incredibly deficient. How do we get around? When I lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I could use a train to get to and from. And what we did was we made sure that our apartment was near,
Mm-hmm.
of all things, the Mall of America.
Right.
Because the Mall of America is a transit hub, obviously. It's a tourist trap. So it had all the train lines, all the bus lines. I could walk across the street to the terminal and go anywhere.
Right.
My doctor's appointments on my own. I could get to my job on my own. And my wife didn't have to drive me or didn't have to make sure I could get places.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone can afford to live near a bus stop. One of the astonishing things about Virginia that I found was that the closer you were to the rail line that went into DC, the more expensive the rent.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You have a chapter in your book on transportation.
Mm-hmm.
How do we navigate this transportation when we have these needs that, quite honestly, are just not met?
Right. They're not met. And the public transportation systems are just notorious for not being on time, either getting you there too early where you have to sit for an hour or 2 hours, or, causing you to arrive late, which makes it impossible to keep a good job. So there are a lot of different things that different communities have done. There are volunteer caregiving agencies. We have one in my county that does, doctor's appointments, hairdressing appointments, and some leisure and recreation. So these are all retired folks that are just looking to help out in some way. Starting some kind of carpooling service can also work. But then, it really becomes a grassroots issue. If you know and can find out who needs to go where, then you can kind of maybe talk to, let's say there's a fleet of buses that are just sitting idle. Even some churches have buses and have vans that they use only on Sunday and for special events. And then it's just so crazy that why won't you take those and use them during the week to get people to jobs, to get people to different places? There's Uber and Lyft, but then Uber and Lyft aren't accessible to people like me who use wheelchairs. And so I know that through the advocacy on the policy front and on people who make the decisions, one little bus can just start a whole just revolution for a small place, a small town, and just, making it a little circulator route around and getting those times straight. But it's really in the people and their voices that have to bring that. Every time someone comes, let's say they're a new person coming to get case management services from me, I ask them whether they're there for that or not. How is your transportation? And if it's really bad, one of the first advocacy things I have them do is write a letter to the board of supervisors about how bad it is. And so that just gets them thinking that, no, we're not addressing this issue right now for you. You want to get a job and you want to go to school, but you're going to need transportation to do that. And so mom and dad are not going to be able to take you forever somewhere. So it's really important that people really think about the grassroots effort and just get one bus, one van, one car. And then soon you will see people kind of glom on to help you in other areas and to take on more shifts to get people around.
In large cities, San Francisco, New York, I believe Chicago now, they have Uber Wave, which is the wheelchair accessible vehicles.
Right.
It's wonderful because Uber guarantees a reasonable time. I think it's a 10-minute window and a 10-minute pickup. The services like that are limited to cities that have enough need to justify the special vehicles. They're wheelchair accessible vans.
Right.
I live in a community of 23,000. I don't see Uber rushing to serve our community.
Right.
It is nice to see that Uber is making that move, and other companies are knowing that wheelchair access and even support animal access have become selling points.
Definitely. Well, everybody should desire to want to be accessible. Right now, Uber and Lyft are in a bit of a lawsuit here in the DC area for their lack of vehicles and things. And that's been ongoing for several years. But, you also need to think about the people that want to take the time to strap in a wheelchair or help break down a scooter. Some of my friends who can walk, they may use scooters that really fold down, break down into two pieces. There's, drivers that don't even want to serve them when the two pieces are less than 20 pounds each and can fit in the trunk of a car. So it's not just that the transportation isn't there, it's the attitudinal barriers on the transit operators that also tell us that we're not worthy to even want to get out. They all think that we stay home, and want to do nothing. And so it's twofold again, like the caregiving situation, about the people who are in charge of making things more accessible. They have to believe that we are worthy of contributing and participating in society in order to make that happen too.
When I was a graduate student in Minnesota, I had some mobility issues and I had some surgeries. And one of the solutions that they proposed to mobility was online learning. Now that every family has experienced online learning, whether we wanted to or not,
Right.
the reality has been exposed that this is not the same as being in the classroom with your classmates. The idea that the disabled don't need to get transit to college campuses or to high school campuses, then to jobs. This idea that, oh, well, you can now function from home. See, you've proven it. We don't need you anymore to come in and be asking for ramps and be asking for transit. And we can just let you work from home forever.
Right.
And I don't know that people understand how that feels to be told, we don't need to see you.
Right. They don't understand. They have no idea. And they also don't understand the compounding negative impact of being isolated, and then the anxiety that comes with staying in so long that it's hard to reintegrate into society. Like that's another new barrier that we have, is because you're not used to being out. Now, you have trouble connecting with people once you get back out, and isolation and depression over not having social opportunities is also going to be a leading cause of, not just suicide, but also complicated health conditions, cognitive and brain decline, all of these things, and then cardiovascular issues because of, the sedentary sitting around, just typing or just watching the computer screen all day. There will probably be a study in another couple of years about how that negatively and adversely impacted people with disabilities in much greater proportion than it did, non-disabled peers. We need to connect, and humans are built to have relationships and to connect with each other. And what they fail to realize is that, fine, we'll work from home, for 8 hours a day. But we then don't have the nightlife. We don't have the recreational opportunities. So going to work is not only, income for us, but it's also social opportunity and connection and human things that we need to survive. So they're not even connecting that if you take it away for the 8-hour day, you've really taken it all away, because it's not going to just suddenly happen in the evening when I'm able to go out and have cocktails or mocktails with friends. We'll just be in and just be in forever. And then a lot of transportation in some of the smaller areas stop running after 7 p.m. in a lot of cases. People just have no idea how much they compound something more by their attitude. Now, granted, we fought a lot to be able to work from home when a lot of supervisors were like, no, what can you do from home? And now all of a sudden, oh, you can do a lot from home. So yeah, go ahead. So it's just been a fine line. We work in too many extremes. You wanted to be home, now you're home. And it's really, you want to find balance to have access to both of those scenarios.
Saw an article yesterday that said what managers really fear is hybrid working.
Yes.
You can work from home all the time. That's great because then we don't have to accommodate your special needs in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be in the office all the time, all right, we can keep an eye on you at least.
Right.
But you want this where you come in flex time 4 days a week or 3 days a week and oh my gosh, you've made things so complicated. That's frustrating because if anything now they should see that there is that balance that every human needs.
Right.
But those of us with disabilities, I'm willing to work 40 hours, but I can't guarantee those 40 hours are going to be Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Right.
I just can't.
Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't be. So long as you're getting the work done, that should be all that matters. I hated going out. I love working from home because I have to put, especially in the wintertime, put so much on, and then that weighs down my limbs, and then I can barely move. And when I'm at work, out of the home, it's hard for me to make my lunch. The microwave and things aren't accessible. It's hard to have a restroom break when you need support and they're not willing to pay for it or they don't accommodate it. So there were these factors. But yes, going in maybe half a day, 3 days a week, it's really about the disability. It's not that I don't want these things, to happen, to be able to stay there, 40 hours, 5 days a week. But it's that, the disability dictates, some limitations. And we have to be willing to compromise for that. And people just, some, it's gotten a lot better, but some still aren't willing to compromise.
How do you approach disability and employment in the field guide?
Well, I talk about how, people with disabilities, when I was younger, there really wasn't a lot of opportunity. And I was also still being bused. So it was hard to form relationships in the 80s, early 80s, late 70s. I was still saying, no, you don't go to your neighborhood school. You go to the school where there's a special needs, even though I was mainstream in regular courses and regular classes, but my local schools weren't always accessible. Now, they move the class and they move it downstairs. So all your classes are on the main level. But I talk about in employment, how it's important for us to get as many little experiences as we can, because that's how we find out what we like and what we're good at. And sometimes when you're a child, as a disabled child, you either get stuck in choir because you can talk and you can sing, or even if you can't, they'll just let you in there because, that's all you can't do. You can't, to them, you can't do any, soccer or sports. You may have a music. I could play clarinet. So that's what I did. How we need to let children do a variety of things, because it's when the other kids, when they're doing sports, they emerge either as a leader or a follower. They find out what they like, what they don't like. And that helps them determine their career paths and what they're going to gravitate to. And so we miss out on that because we just get stuck in this place that says, oh, this would be good for people with disabilities. We get stuck being a secretary because it's a desk job and we need to sit and just move our fingers and type. And that's the only muscles that seem to work sometimes when that's not true. So there are a lot of things, like I wish I had went into graphic design and event planning, because those are the things that I've had more opportunities to do as an adult as opposed to a child. Kids have so many camps. So get your child in there, see how they adapt. Even if it looks like it's not going to be accessible, put them in there anyway, and they're going to learn to adapt to that. There's some one-handed chefs now that people have never seen. People cooking from their wheelchairs and becoming all kinds of different things. And so back then, for me, it just wasn't an option. Nobody really thought about it. All the Myers-Briggs and the personality tests that I took were kind of it. But then they would even further narrow down those results into things that I could physically do. And so that's where, really limited on the employment opportunities. So I just, encourage parents to give a child with a disability as much different things as they possibly can. And also, I benefited greatly from the Department of Aging and Rehab Services, or DARS, as it's called here. In different places, it's called different things, but it's the same thing. I got a job through them at 16 years of age, working for a nonprofit organization. And I also benefited from the federal program, which is the Workforce Recruitment Program. So every summer that I was in college on the winter and the spring semester, that summer I got placed at a government agency where it was my salary was paid for by the federal government, defense agencies, federal agencies just got a free laborer, but they were also able to see what people with disabilities could do. It wasn't coming out of their pot of funds, but the federal government was supplementing that. And so that was also a great way to find out what I liked and what I didn't like in the work setting. So those early experiences, those early opportunities really helped me hone in and also show me that I can work. So I think it's never too early to get a child a little job, a little side hustle, something they can do. They work for the church or they work for your company. They work for the car wash, just really get them involved in doing things early on so that they can get a good work ethics for one, and then see what they can do for two, and then demonstrate to others how they can contribute for number three.
I've interviewed Temple Grandin on the podcast, and Dr. Grandin mentions that most people want to feel productive.
Yes.
And children who are disabled need to have chores. They need to have small jobs. They need to have those experiences, and sheltering doesn't really help. I have been asked by colleagues, well, wouldn't you love to have universal basic income so you could stay home and do what you want?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What they really mean is, don't you wish you could just stay home and do nothing?
Right.
And I think most people really do want to be productive.
Absolutely.
Most of us want to feel like we're taking care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We want to feel like we're contributing to the family. And I think employment isn't always about having the career define us, but it is about feeling like we're part of something.
That's right. Well, that's the purpose that I mentioned. And kind of, when you graduate from high school, those are when the things ensue as a person with a disability, because you have to find everything on your own. And if it doesn't exist, you feel stuck. And so that starts your downward spiral into depression, is a lack of purpose and a lack of feeling like you have opportunity to do something.
You have sections in the book on physical and mental health.
Mm-hmm.
It is very easy to find yourself in that downward spiral.
Yes.
I am underemployed. I'm stuck at home. We've got COVID going on.
Can't find a caregiver.
These are the emails I receive. These are the direct messages I receive. I cannot always respond because I don't know the individual situation. Sometimes I'll ask, tell me where you are, and I can help you find what's in your city, what's in your county.
Mm-hmm.
I am blessed with a wonderful wife. And throughout this pandemic, we have been a great team caring for the two kids who are at home.
Mm-hmm.
And that family connection is a lifesaver some days, right? You wake up and you have someone with you.
Mm-hmm. All the time, yes.
Whether she wants to be or not on
Yes.
some days, yes.
Yeah.
How do we take care of our mental health without spiraling down, feeling sorry for ourselves, feeling bitter? How can we remind disabled self-advocates and the disabled communities we serve that mental health is health? It has to be a priority, taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I just think you need to admit that you are having some issues. I recently sought out counseling, and I had it in my early 20s through a local church in my area. And I met with them for a little time just to get through a certain rough patch, especially as I age as a person with a disability, and some of my optimism, is challenged by physical limitation. Admitting that I really needed to talk to someone. I was grieving a friend recently, was another reason why I sought out someone to meet with, because I didn't have that friend to talk to. She was my best friend. She also has a form of muscular dystrophy. She passed away at the age of 44 in 2019. And so I said, I don't have her to talk to anymore. We both could commiserate over disability. So she was a like peer in that way. She had one parent like I did. Her father is still living. He's a Vietnam veteran. My mom is still living. So we were very similar in our home life. And we would encourage each other. I could call her and tell her I needed a pep talk. And she would pep talk me into feeling better. I would pep talk her when she called me and said, I need a pep talk now. So realizing for me that void was gone promoted me to seek the assistance that I needed. And so that was one thing. And then just realizing only recently in my late 30s and 40s, I started to connect with more Black women. I'm a, African American woman, and I realized that, with so much of the racial tension, I needed to get around a tribe that had similar issues to me and then talk about that. And throughout 30 plus years, I never realized that I needed that until I started meeting with them and I could commiserate very candidly about some of the tensions that were going on. So recognizing that this is an issue, and I don't want us to get, separated, white, Black, Asian in these silos. But in order to talk about some of the things that we have seen on TV and in the news, I realized that I needed that tribe in order to help me. When I mostly grew up in a predominantly white community, I needed a tribe of my own peers who had similar experiences in order to talk about those issues and feel safe and have their understanding, because they were also similar, experiencing the same workplace angst and some of the, undertones of prejudice that are in the workplace. And that's one thing I see too about sometimes people with autism. Sometimes you all don't want to hang around each other when you can really be soothed by hanging around people that are just like you. And a lot of parents tell me, well, he doesn't want to associate with other people with disabilities. And sometimes I'm thinking, man, girl, you better get around some people that have similar disabilities to you so that you guys can commiserate about what is ailing and what is affecting you. So I encourage parents to prompt them, to go and to be open in order to talk to others like yourself, not, all the time. Talking to someone, period, is great. But sometimes you need shared experience and connection in order to get through the experiences that are unique to you.
The disability communities are adversely affected by socioeconomic bias, by racial bias, bigotry. It is very difficult to be disabled and on the margins. So when we talk about, like, my daughters, their diagnoses were later than the typical autistic or PTSD diagnoses, in part because they're girls.
Mm-hmm.
They are from an impoverished background because they were in the foster system. And my wife and I did everything we could for those 4 years that we were their foster parents to make sure that they were safe and protected, but they were still part of that system, which is traumatizing.
Mm-hmm.
Our systems perpetuate those biases against women, minorities, the poor. A lot of the problems I see with depression and with fighting for services are intersectional.
Mm-hmm. They definitely are. And make no mistake, we are all, I think, in this together. But sometimes you cannot have those candid conversations with everybody. They're not going to understand. So that's what I mean as far as just on the mental health side, in order to go along to get along with everyone else, you need to have those private times and have that ability to be candid and open and honest. And, at work, you put on your game face that all is well and all is fine, because sometimes you're not around safe space or you're not around people that can help you. And the other thing could be said too, there are a lot of stereotypes that, people with disabilities, were so resilient, we can get through anything. And then we don't get the help and the support because of those stereotypes that we need. And so all of that, is a contributing factor. And, let's just be honest, a lot of people don't help people that are strong. They bring the strong people their problems and their issues, and they kind of eat, shoots, and leaves, but then they don't wait around for wait, I have this I want to talk about. And they're like, oh, nope, see, you got to go by. And so I think that can be a really vicious cycle of never feeling like you can really express yourself. But there are so many stereotypes. People with disabilities, women, men, that, everybody's handling their own thing when people are really suffering in silence and even dying on the inside sometimes. And for instance, there was an episode of one of the medical dramas about how Black women are treated in the medical, that we tolerate pain more somehow. There's Henrietta Lacks and the use of all her cells, and kind of dismissing women when they say they have pain, saying, "Oh, you're okay, take some aspirin." There's just so many things that are so hurtful to different societies and different classes of people as a whole, that it's just astounding. And there's so much to do and be aware of and to be knowledgeable about, that it is exhausting. Some days I don't want to be an advocate. It's like, I'm not going to choose that battle today. I'm going to take a break. And, it's going to go the way it's going to go. It'll have one less advocate today. And so you also need to realize when you need to take a step back, and maybe that's not the battle that you can fight today, maybe tomorrow.
Before I move on from Disability, a Field Guide for the Rest of Us, what are the other topics you address that people can look forward to when the book becomes available?
I love all the topics. I just chose them, with the intent of having kind of that foundation. Housing, transportation, employment, those really almost go together. Can't have one without the other, and they're so reliant and interconnected. The emergency of preparedness, I think, is something really interesting, because I think most of us are not prepared for an emergency. And I'm not even talking about natural disaster. I'm talking about when a primary caregiver dies, if your family member can't come or can't get to you. Disability is an emergency of its own to me. So, I talk about, getting some of your finances straight, even if it's on credit, to be able to, like, my backup plan is I'm going to call an agency. If something happens to my mother and then the caregiver can't come, I have the agencies in my phone to say, look, I need somebody to come right now. I have a credit card. Here we go. I have it. So I think that people aren't prepared for an emergency that's unique to them. Okay, forget natural disaster. Like, we're all going to die in a natural disaster. We're all going down on the plane if something happens to it. It doesn't matter if you're disabled or not. But there are things and traps just in our home that create, emergencies that are compounded and exhausted or exasperated by disability. And so I talk about that in the book. And I talk about, a woman, a quadriplegic woman who died in Hurricane Katrina because she couldn't get out of her house, and how the house was just a death trap. Why didn't she have, she probably couldn't afford it, of course, but open sesame for the door. Just go out. I'm probably going out in my wheelchair and just going to higher ground. I know it's flooding, it's raining, but I'm just going to keep going. The water is going to chase me. Okay. And so I just think about these things. How can I, sound the alarm to let people know the disaster is right in your own home, exacerbated by your own disability. So there's that. There's physical health. Like, I wish I'd have stayed swimming. I was such a swimmer. The doctor compliments on my lungs and how good that I'm still able to breathe. I'm not on a trach yet, as a lot of people with muscular dystrophy succumb to. I wish I'd have stayed swimming, and how we need to continue to push young people if they're doing something that's active like that. Now I'm afraid to go in the water, but I used to be called a fish. So all these are all the lens of me talking about a broad topic, but I'm talking about my struggle through it and my realization of things that I could have mitigated for myself as I get older, as an aging person with a disability, and what I should have done, and what you can now do if you're still young, if you're still in your 20s, if you're still with your parents, and what parents can also do to push and prod their children with disabilities.
For many of the parents I meet, the scariest thought they have is what happens after they are gone.
Yes.
They are the caregivers. They have chosen to become state providers. So they get an income for caring for their child. But when they're gone, that child will have no caregiver.
Right.
And they haven't prepared their adult child to be an adult.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't prepared this young adult to interview caregivers, to call for transportation, to use curbside grocery shopping or the pharmacy on demand.
Mm-hmm.
And I encourage these parents to think about, by doing everything, you're not fostering that ability to go on after you are no longer able to provide those supports.
Right.
You have to start. You have to say, emergencies happen. So here's how you work the phone. Here are the numbers you need to call for the pharmacy. Here is the number for the electric company. Here, and so on. So you can prepare. I understand that adult parent wants to, you don't want to think of your child on his or her own. Even when your child is now 30, 40 years old, you just don't.
Right.
And I think you're right. Those emergencies are just life.
Yes.
I have several friends whose adult children are cognitively impaired, but they're also diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
So the insulin becomes a life and death situation.
Yeah. And then you also have parents that let them eat whatever they want, never saying no.
Yeah.
To send them into, anaphylactic shock, just never denying them anything. And then they can't, the children can't get along. I realize there's some, significant behavioral issues, but you're also letting them kind of get away with murder from, 3 years to 30. From 3 to 30, you let them do whatever they want. And now you want to rein them in so that they can be livable with other peers. And it's just impossible. You have to nip those behaviors sometimes in the bud at an early age. And I don't want, anybody to be like, well, I can't, because of the whatever, they just are never going to be that. But some people, some behaviors do need to be challenged. And people can kind of learn, well, I guess I won't do that anymore. Tantrum doesn't work anymore here. And we're, parents, and I know people are frustrated, but they just cave. We're just all the time caving to every whim, every disgruntledness, every hurt and every pain. But it makes them also not a good candidate when it's time to go to a group facility, a group setting. They might get bullied, they might get beat up, they might get abused, all because, it was free reign from 3 to 30. And so that's also, a warning that I have in my book. It can't be that way.
Some of the disabled students I have worked with go through something called the CLE, the College Living Experience, where they have supports in a dormitory setting,
Mm-hmm.
and it helps them get to campus on time, get to classes on time. And yet in that second, third year of college, they're floundering because they haven't developed good habits.
Mm-hmm.
For my daughters, even though they're only 8 and 9, I have them prepare a daily planner. Look at your checklist. Did you do your homework? Did you sign every page?
That's great.
Did you put your name on it for the teacher? Did you? And it sounds, to a lot of parents are saying, oh my gosh, you're really getting rigid and structured for your children. And what I try to say is, because I have seen so many disabled young adults with bad habits, I know my daughters are going to struggle with these executive functions,
Mm-hmm.
time management, medication management, general health issues. I want to give them some structured tools that they can use independently.
Right.
And too many disabled young adults haven't been given that structure, sort of that freedom to fail.
Yes.
If my daughter forgot to do something, she's here at home still, we can help her, we can fix it. But I want her to do it on her own or not do it. Mom and dad are here to help her right now, but I want her to develop those good habits. And I think if our goal is to have people feel independent and secure and successful, we need to start by training them as early as possible.
Right. Right. And one other thing too, with that said, is that, a lot of times, let's say you have 3 kids, maybe the older one has, what I've seen is that the older one, if they have a disability, the younger one can come along and really be a caretaker. But that doesn't always translate. When you are disciplining your child or you're, telling them how to do things, the siblings are watching. Okay. The siblings are going to be the ones who either say, yes, I'm going to take care of them and I'm going to help them because I love them and I see how much they're trying, or they're going to be like, I'm not dealing with this at all. And I believe that that's a direct reason or a direct response to how the parent treated the child. Like if the parent kind of made them do something, there's no scientific evidence for this, but I'd love to see a study. How the parent relates to the child, making the child pick up their slack despite disability, is going to be so important for those siblings to want to say, yes, I'm going to take care of little Susie or little Johnny, or no, little Susie and little Johnny is hell on wheels. I'm not dealing with that. I don't care if they are my sibling. So I think that the way that you respond, the way that you discipline, the way you push is going to really resonate. You want these younger siblings or these older siblings to have a hand, and I believe they should. I'm not one of these people who believe they shouldn't have anything to do. That's their life. They should go live it. But, when you get 70 and 80 as a parent, if they can go and live in maybe the mother-in-law suite and they can have some support, I believe a sibling, should be wanting to do that. I think my sibling would do that for me. I'm the youngest. They're 5 years older than me. They don't have to have any assistance for me now, but I feel assured that they would, and that's because through the years, I didn't get a pass. I didn't get, she's disabled. Give her a break. It's okay. That's your sister. It was never that. We were always, you work, I work, and we do this. I'm going to still pull my own weight, but I may need support. You may have to come help me. And I think the child will have a much greater respect for other siblings who have disabilities, depending on how the parent treated them growing up.
I would like to think that parents listening to this podcast understand that we're not saying that you have to be mean or harsh or anything like that. No, no, no. What we're saying, though, is you have to let your child make mistakes. You have to let your child become independent. And that's hard as a parent. It's like the first time you watch them ride that bike and you want to run up and catch them before they fall over. Or, the first time they're doing anything on their own, you want to protect them. But I think parenting in large part is also being a safety net so your child can fail.
Right.
Go out there and go to school. And if you don't make it through every class, that's okay. We'll figure it out and we'll try again.
Yeah. And you just have to be a little bit more fearless. They're going to get hurt. Rejection hurt as a child. I remember, transportation is probably such a big deal to me because I remember in junior high and high school, I couldn't attend a friend's funeral because my parents didn't have transportation for me. And that hurt, but it also propelled me to want to drive. I got denied 7 times from a case manager who I believe was prejudiced to get the help, the financial assistance from vocational rehab to get my vehicle modified. So they were going to pay for some of it. I and my parents had to pay for the van, but they were going to pay some of the modifications on the van so I could be able to drive it. But I believe that deep hurt over not being able to kept me going. Almost 7 years of denials. And then I got a new case manager. I remember my dad coming down and saying, we want somebody new. He advocated for me. But I could always think back to the meanest bus drivers I had, to missing one of my great friends' funeral because nobody could get off work and we didn't have an accessible vehicle to take me in. That hurt so deeply, but that also motivated me so much to want to drive on my own and to, I can go to any funeral I want to. Of course, I don't want to go to funerals, but when your friends who have similar disabilities are dropping, you want to be there and you want to be able to participate. And not being there, not being able to grieve, I still think about those things. And those are the things that were motivating me to get my own vehicle and to drive myself and to keep, saying, I'm going to appeal this no in the face of adversity to finally get to my yes. So yes, things hurt, scrapes hurt, bumps, bruises, what people call you, what people say you, but these are defining moments. in who you're going to become and the level of ambition that you're going to have.
In addition to Disability, a field guide for the rest of us, you have other books out there. We briefly mentioned it, but I do want to spend just a little bit of time promoting this. You are an award-winning romantic suspense, or is it suspense and romance? How do you phrase that?
Yeah, romantic suspense. The romance is always first with little.
And the trilogy, is it the Jameson family?
Yes, the Jameson. It's actually going to be 4 books. So one more is coming out, but 3 are out right now. They're a well-to-do family in my hometown, Alexandria, where I was born and grew up. And it's just about the adversity they also receive on the road to love. I love my happily ever afters endings. And, romance was just something that I just fell in love with. My parents were married for 42 years, and I just gravitated toward that. I always knew I'd write about disability eventually because that's who I am, but I had to kind of live through something. But I won a contest years ago in my 20s, writing my first novella. And that's kind of what changed, my trajectory. I was going through college, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast. I did flunk out of my first school. Then I went to community college, got my associate's degree. But in the midst of getting my associate's, I was having a hard time for math, for liberal arts. So when the math class was going on, the teacher was talking about whatever, some complicated problem, I kind of withdrew into myself, turned my paper over, and started penning these stories. And so that's really kind of how I started getting into that, winning a national contest. I got a trip to New York and a monetary advance, and of course, publishing the book in an anthology with 3 other writers. But it gave me validation, helped me improve my grades too, because I found, again, that purpose and that, somebody said, wow, you're really good at this. Here's an award for it. So I just love the love stories, love, burgeoning love, people coming together. But of course, with the suspense, there's car chases, fires, things being blown up, thrown in to give the characters a little something. They need purpose too. So they have to stay alive in order to find their happily ever after and to find love and, a solid relationship eventually by the end of the book. So 3 books are out now. Whatever May Come, A Current Affair, and Against My Window. There's 4 siblings, 2 girls and 2 boys. And so the 4th one will be coming next year also. After my disability book releases, I'll be releasing JoJo's story, An Occasional Hero. That's what the name of the book is, Occasional Hero. That's the forthcoming book.
And as a writer, you're involved in Sisters in Crime, the romance writers organizations.
Yes.
You are also a mentor and a writing coach.
Mm-hmm.
You are doing all of these things that are inspiring.
I just love it. God gave me my writing. I think in college, I actually prayed. I was crying about my math for liberal arts grades. And I said, can I have something else if this doesn't work? And he gave that opportunity, opened the contest door. And I love coaching my students. I'm helping them write books. I have 3 right now. I may have 2 more that are interested. I help them publish their book and understand the ins and outs of publishing. I have 15 books total, and I continue to work. All of these things really motivate me just to live my life and be a contributing member of society until I just don't have anything left to give. But I'm giving 110% right now as best I can. And I just, not to turn this into the God hour, but I just thank God for all the blessings that He's given to me.
It is a sad commentary on the publishing industry and on television that until they cast more diverse characters in some of the Hallmark movies and then on Lifetime, Ion, and other networks, it took a while for them to realize that people didn't really pay attention to the disabilities or the ethnicities. What they wanted was a great story.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had Holly Robinson Peete start doing Hallmark movies, and we had some of these other actors and actresses come in. As they bring in these diverse casts, the ratings have actually gone up because the stories are better.
They are better, and they include more of us. when more of us are on the television, you'll get more people watching. So, and just, to say the people, we did miss it because we weren't there. So we weren't watching. So we notice when we're not there. When we're there, we're going to turn out. We've always turned out anyway because I love romance. I still watch it, even though it's largely whitewashed. I still just love a good story and I like romance and I'll still watch those. But now that we have more Black female leads, we have people with disabilities, I'm here for it. I can support even more. That was the same in the book industry. Mostly white romances, no people of color, no interracial marriages or relationships. And those also people really see, and that we have money. We have money to support. We have money to buy and consume. And so, hopefully we'll get more stories. And we also can finally get away from portraying people with disabilities as always the villainous characters, too. A lot of superhero characters, a lot of villains, even dare I say, presidential leaders. Oh, they have a disability and they're just so villainous. But we can play a wide range of roles and bring a lot to the table. We can be good and we can be bad, just like we are in real life.
I find that comment about the interracial couples interesting because the new census for the first time allowed you to check more than one box.
Right.
And they were stunned to find out that nearly 1 million couples were multiracial.
Yes.
Well, gee, when you let people choose more than one box, it turns out most of us don't fit neatly into a box.
Yeah. Yes, we don't. And we have multiple disabilities too. We have multiple everything. So, we are hopefully it will be a stay. Hopefully it's not a trending or passing thing, but more diversity as a reflection of what is already going on. It's been here. We have the Loving case. What was that, 1950 something? It's like, how long is it going to take us to get on board and to see ourselves in these, in television and film when it's already a reflection in the outside world? So it's already here. It's just, every industry is just catching up to depict those stories.
And I would think that my family is as American as you get. The girls know that their cousins down in San Antonio, Texas are mixed race. And it's a given. And it took a while for the publishing industry and the visual media to catch up, for television and film to catch up with that reality that our children, thankfully, are living.
We are.
As a child of the 60s and 70s, I didn't see that. It was sort of, that wasn't on TV. Even if it was the neighborhood in which I lived, it wasn't the reality I saw in the media.
Right. And it's also a testament of how you need to get more diverse producers and funding capitalists who look like everybody else. And then they will be able to dictate what gets put out, because that's also, the person in the booth calling all the shots also needs to be diverse. And they will be able to tell stories that reflect who they are, which will then reflect all of us.
So if people want to find Disability, a field guide for the rest of us, if they want to find the Jameson Family series, or if they want to find out more about your coaching, they can visit TraceeGarner.com. It's TRACEE Garner.com.
That's right.
Your books are available on Amazon?
Yes, they are. They are available on Amazon. The new book, it's available for pre-order. Disability and Anecdotal Field Guide for the Rest of Us is on pre-order right now, but it will be delivered January 7th if you get it. Yeah, so people can go and check that out right now. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at T Garner, Tee Garner, Garner, my last name, at T Garner on Instagram and Twitter, and my website, as you so kindly mentioned.
It has been an honor to have this hour with you. I look forward to reading the field guide, and I look forward to probably sampling some of the Jameson Family. I saw that you also have it out there on Audible.
I do. I sure do.
And I admit, I listen to things while I ride my exercise bike.
Hey, that's good. Good listening.
Thank you so much for being out there and inspiring. I appreciate all that you're doing, and I thank you for appearing on the Autistic Me podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and thank you to all your listeners.
So, ladies and gentlemen, remember the name Tracee Garner. Visit her website, follow her on Twitter and Instagram, and go buy a book. Thank you for listening.